Chloe sits cross-legged on her attic studio floor, surrounded by half-finished canvases, a single lamp casting golden light across her face. She holds a tiny sprig of dried lavender between her fingers, twirling it slowly. Her voice is soft, conspiratorial, alive with memory. You guys will never believe what happened. I'm Chloe, no last name, just the girl who paints crust of soul onto canvas, and this story? It started with a favor, a garden, and a man who came home too soon. It was one of those perfect afternoons where the lake glitters like crushed glass and the air smells like warm bread and possibility. I'd promised my neighbor Everett, retired horticulturist, salt and pepper hair, green eyes that look like they've seen every flower open at least once, I'd water his garden while he was away at some plant conference. His yard is legendary, peonies the size of my fist, lavender so thick you can taste it, roses climbing the trellis like they're trying to escape into the sky, mint spilling over the path in reckless green waves. So there I was, barefoot in a pale floral sundress, brass watering can in hand, letting the water arc in silver ribbons over the roots. The sun was pressing warm against my shoulders, and I was lost in it. This is what I paint, I thought, this exact moment when light and life kiss, when the earth drinks and the sky leans in to watch. The lake hummed in the distance, steady as a heartbeat, and I could smell crushed mint under my toes with every step. And then I heard the gate creak. I turned, and there he was, Everett, duffel still over one shoulder, cocky shirt sleeves rolled high, looking like he'd stepped straight out of one of my sketches. His eyes went wide, then softened into this slow, sun-warmed smile that made my stomach flip like a canvas in the wind. Home early, he said, voice low and rough from travel. Didn't expect to find you making my peonies confess their secrets. I laughed, couldn't help it. They missed you. I was just keeping them honest. I tilted the can, one last droplet clung to the spout, trembled, then fell plink onto a pink petal. And in that second, I swear, the whole garden held its breath. The roses paused mid-climb, the lavender swayed like it was listening. He set his bag down, rolled his neck, and took the hose from my hands. Our fingers brushed, deliberate or not, I still don't know, and the contact was like a spark jumping from match to wick, like the first stroke of cadmium yellow on a blank canvas. You've got the touch, he murmured, eyes on the water stream. They're thriving. I remembered the first time he'd said something like that. Last spring I was paint smudged, wrestling a stubborn rosebush, thorns snagging my sleeves. He'd knelt beside me, guided the shears, cut just above the 5-leaf set, trust the plant to know where to grow. His hand over mine, steady, patient. I'd felt it then, too, this quiet electricity, like the garden was whispering, pay attention. 2 months ago, I'd left a watercolor of his lavender under his door, a note tucked beneath, for the man who taught me light lives in layers. I'd watched from my porch as he read it, thumb tracing the painted stem, a private smile softening his mouth. I'd told myself it was just gratitude, but standing there with the hose between us, I wasn't so sure. Flashback 1.5. Last June he'd caught me sketching his mint patch at dawn, dew still clinging to the leaves. I'd been embarrassed, but he'd crouched beside me, pointed to a tiny white flower. That's catmint. Cats love it, but it's the scent that stays with you. He'd crushed a leaf between his fingers, held it under my nose, sharp, sweet, unforgettable. I'd painted it that night, and the scent still lived in the green I mixed. He suggested we check the greenhouse, his orchids were particular, he said, and needed a look. I followed him through the glass door, and the air changed, thick, humid, alive. Orchids hung in baskets like aerial dancers, roots dangling like they were reaching for something just out of grasp. The mister hissed, droplets beaded on my collarbone, slid down into the neckline of my dress. I didn't wipe them away. The warmth wrapped around us like a second skin, and I could smell moss, bark, and something faintly citrus from the vanda blooms. You came back early to check the orchids, or me? I teased, tracing a vanda's violet lip with one finger. He laughed low, earthy, surprised. A horticulturist never admits bias. His gaze flicked to me, then away. But your sketches of my phalaenopsis, they breathe. I keep one taped inside my field journal. It's dog-eared now. I remembered last summer he'd shown me how to mount an orchid on cork. Our heads bent close, his breath stirring my hair as he explained, roots need air as much as water, freedom to reach. I'd wondered, even then, if he was talking about more than plants. 3 weeks ago, I'd caught him in the greenhouse at dawn, mist curling around his silhouette as he whispered to a stubborn cattleya, "Come on, old friend, open for me." The tenderness in his voice had lodged in my chest like a seed. I hadn't meant to watch, but I couldn't look away. Flashback 2.5. Last December he'd found me in the garden during the first frost, trying to save a potted geranium. He'd wrapped it in burlap, his hands brushing mine as he tied the knot. Some things need protection to survive the cold. I'd thought of that moment every time I mixed alizarin crimson, how his fingers had lingered, just a second too long. We moved back to the peonies, the sun higher now, shadows stretching long and languid. We knelt side by side, loosening soil around a drooping stem. My fingers sank into cool earth, his followed, our hands met beneath the surface, knuckles brushing, soil crumbling between us. Neither of us pulled away. The dirt was cool, almost silky, and I could feel the tiny roots threading between our fingers like secrets. "You've got a gentle touch," I said, voice husky with sun and something else. "Years of learning what wants to grow," he replied. His thumb grazed my wrist, accidental, then not. The contact sent a shiver up my arm, like the first stroke of ultramarine on wet paper. I thought of last autumn. I'd brought him a wilted supermarket orchid, half dead from fluorescent lights. He'd repotted it with reverent care, narrating each step. "See, even the half-dead can be persuaded." I'd watched his hands and thought, I wonder what else he could coax back to life. A month ago, he'd left a tiny pot of forget-me-nots on my porch after I'd mentioned missing blue in my palette. No note, just the flowers, roots wrapped in damp moss, like a secret. I'd painted them the next day, and the blue still haunts my dreams. Flashback 3.5. Last February he'd invited me to prune the apple tree in his yard. I'd been terrible at it, lopping off branches like a toddler with scissors. He'd laughed, taken the shears and shown me, "Feel the weight cut where the energy wants to go." His hand over mine again, guiding the blade. I'd felt the tree's pulse through the wood, and his. "Hey guys," I said suddenly, standing and brushing soil from my knees, breaking the spell with a grin. "We're about to get into the spicy portion of the story, so please don't forget to like and subscribe." I turned back to him, heart hammering. "You were just watering the plants, but why does it feel like we're the ones taking root?" The silence stretched, bees droning, lake lapping, our breathing sinking. He rose slowly, soil clinging to his palms. "Because," he said, voice rough with honesty, "some things grow whether you plan them or not." He led me to the potting shed, a dim, fragrant cave of terracotta tools and possibility. A rare Paphiopedilum orchid waited on the bench, roots spilling from its cracked pot like it was trying to escape. The air smelled of cedar shavings, damp moss, and something faintly sweet, jasmine, maybe, from a bloom he'd brought in last week. "Needs repotting before the roots strangle themselves," he said. "Care to assist?" I rolled up my sleeves. "Show me." We worked in tandem. He cradled the orchid like a child. I sifted bark and moss. Our hands overlapped in the bowl, fingers tangling, untangling, lingering. The bark was rough, the moss cool and springy, and every time our knuckles brushed, it was like a new color mixing on my palette. The orchid's roots were thick, almost fleshy, and I could feel its pulse through the thin skin. "Do you ever name them?" I asked. "Only the stubborn ones. This one's Chloe's Folly refused to bloom until you started visiting." I laughed. "Flattery via foliage, truth via roots." I remembered last winter I'd been sketching in the shed during a rainstorm, paint water mixing with rainwater on the floor. He'd brought me tea, steam curling between us as he said, "Some flowers only open in private company." I'd sipped the tea, chamomile, honey, a hint of lavender, and felt the warmth spread through me like sunlight. 2 weeks ago, he'd texted from his conference. "The hotel orchids are pathetic. Miss my garden, and the artist who makes it sing." I'd stared at the message for an hour, thumb hovering over reply. I'd typed "I miss the garden too" and deleted it. Typed "I miss you" and deleted that too. Finally sent a photo of his peonies, caption "They're waiting." In the shed, our shoulders brushed as we lifted the orchid into its new home. His hand closed over mine on the pot's rim, warm, calloused, steady. The orchid's roots settled into the fresh mix, and I could feel its relief, like a sigh. Flashback 4.5. Last July he'd found me crying in the garden after a bad critique. I'd been sitting on the bench, paintbrush snapped in half. He'd sat beside me, silent, then handed me a single white rose. Some things break so they can grow stronger. I'd kept the rose pressed between pages of my sketchbook, its petals still fragrant. Flashback 5.5. 3 months ago he'd taught me to graft a rose. Our hands had been covered in sap, sticky and sweet. He'd wiped a streak from my cheek with his thumb, and I'd frozen, heart in my throat. Grafting's about trust, he'd said. 2 plants, 1 future. What are we growing here, Everett? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rustle of bark. He didn't answer right away. His thumb traced the inside of my wrist, slow, deliberate. Something that scares the hell out of me, and feels like sunlight. We emerged into the golden hour, carrying iced tea to the patio. The garden glowed, peonies backlit, lavender luminous, mint shimmering like green fire. I sat on the table's edge, legs swinging. He leaned against the railing, eyes never leaving me. I paint to capture what's fleeting, I said, gesturing between us. But this feels like it could last. Some hybrids are stronger for the risk. Flashback 6.5. Last September he'd caught me dancing in the garden at midnight, barefoot, paint on my ankles. I'd been listening to jazz through an open window, twirling among the roses. He'd watched from the shadows, then stepped into the light. You move like you're part of the garden. I'd laughed, spun him once, and he'd let me stiff at first, then swaying, his hand warm on my waist. As the sun dipped, we walked the moonlit paths, fireflies winking like living brushstrokes. We named every plant. That's the David Austin rose. Smells like my grandmother's perfume. Those are the Catmint twins, always fighting for space, and with every name, the garden felt more like ours. The air cooled, but the warmth between us grew. I stopped beneath the rose trellis, petals silvered by moonlight. I don't want this to end with the garden, I said. Then let's not end it. He lifted my hand, turned it palm up, and pressed a single lavender sprig into it. No bow, no gift wrap, just the promise of scent and memory. The sprig was still warm from his pocket, and I could smell the lake on it, the earth, the day. I closed my fingers around it. This moment, you, the lake sighed. The garden held its breath, and something wild, unplanned, unstoppable took root beneath the stars. Chloe leans into the camera, lavender sprig still twirling between her fingers, eyes bright with mischief and something deeper. And that's how watering plants became the start of something untamable. Cresthevins got a way of making moments feel like forever, doesn't it? If you love this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Chloe's Dangerous Desires. What's next for me and Everett? Stick around to find out. See you in the next one.